Begin today the Gemara at the Mishnah on the bottom of Daf Samach Daled Amud Beis. Here we're going to have a few Mishnayos that are going to discuss halachas that are not directly related to anything we spoke about before, or b'chlal the theme of Masechtas Nazir, but because in the previous Mishnah it mentioned this concept called Raglayim L'Davar. When you have something that indicates or is connected to something, Raglayim L'Davar simply means there's legs to the matter, meaning that there's a reason to believe in a certain way, so it brings other halachas that also are related to that concept. A person finds a person buried somewhere and he discovers this for the first time. He was not buried there by anybody as far as, nobody knew that this was a place that was designated as a cemetery. Just all of a sudden, you're doing work somewhere and you discover a mace there for the first time. No, we're not talking about Tumas HaTahimer. Let's see. Mushkav Kedarkai, and this mace was lying the way a person is usually buried, and the Gemara is going to explain what that means. So now, if you want to move this mace out of this area, you don't want this place to be a cemetery, you want to use it for something else. So Noitloi Vest Tfusasai, you're allowed to remove this mace, and also Tfusasai means the earth that surrounds him. There's a certain amount that you have to remove. You also remove that, and that's it. And now this area is tahir, and you can use it for anything else. Right. So the theme of this Mishnah here is to discuss in what situations do you know that if you discover a person buried there, that this area is really an ancient cemetery. So you can't remove the mace from there. And when do you say that, no, this person was not buried here with the intention to establish this as a cemetery. He was buried there temporarily with the intention that he'll one day be moved from here. So when you find this one mace that's buried here, and no one knew about this, and all of a sudden you discover him, so our assumption is that he was just buried there temporarily, and the plan was to remove him. So it's not a cemetery. So you're allowed to remove him and the earth surrounding him, and then the place is started. Similar Shnayim, if you found two people buried in this area, Noitlam Vestfusasan, you can remove them with this earth surrounding them as well. But Matzah Shloisha, if you discover three mason buried in one area, so now it depends in how close or far they're buried. If the distance between these three mason buried here is from 4 amas to 8 amas, in other words, not closer than 4 and not further than 8, so then this is really a cemetery. And a cemetery that was established to be such cannot be removed from this area. There's a huge discussion, not here in the Gemara, but in Masechta Baba Basra, where this is brought up regarding exactly what the shear of Dal Damas to Shmei Namas is. And there, the Gemara describes that in those times when they would bury, they wouldn't bury the way we do today in the ground, but it was they dug caves. And then in the caves, in the walls of the caves, they would bury the people. And it was exactly the shear of exactly the holes inside these caves, how they would bury was very precise. And therefore there's a very specific shear of how the burial happened, and that's what this shear of Arba at Shmeina Amas is based on. There's machlokes there in the Gemara Baba Basra how exactly to explain it. But the Gemara over here doesn't go through all these details. Sagt the Mishnah weiter, so now, once you discover that this is a Shchunas Kvares, Beide Keimenu Ulahalon Esr Mama. So possibly the cave that you found over here in this area that has 3 people buried, so it could be that in this courtyard, there's now another cave further away. And the way they would do it then is, there would be one cave, and then there would be sort of a break, and then they would make another cave further down. So you have to inspect the area all the way down to 20 amas to see if there are more people buried there. So if you find then other people buried 20 amas away, so then you should go and inspect the area another 20 amas, because that's the way the Seder was. They had one cave, then another cave, so you have to keep on checking the area. So here the Mishnah uses this expression. Here, because you found 3 mason, so there's legs to this matter, there's reason to believe that this is not just someone that was buried here temporarily, but this was established as a graveyard, so therefore you can't change it, you can't move it from here. If though, like the Mishnah said in the beginning, if it was just the fact that you found one person and it was discovered for the first time and no one knew that he was buried there to establish it as a Beis HaKvares, then you will be able to remove that person with the surrounding. But now that we have Raglayim L'Davar, now that we see that there's a few people buried there, so this leads us to believe that this was established as a Beis HaKvares. So now the Gemara will explain the expression that it said in the beginning of the Mishnah, Hamoitze meis betchila mushkav kedarkai. The Gemara will explain what this means.
What's the extra word
It's interesting why the Mishnah says it again. I'm not sure. The Gemara does not explain it either, but I touched it the way what it means. It goes back to the beginning of the Mishnah. Amar Rav Yehuda, so Rav Yehuda says, it said in the Mishnah, Hamoitze, or the Gemara says, Matzah, that he discovered. Meaning that he just happened to come upon this mace, this one mace that's buried here in this place. What does that mean? Prat l'motzi. That excludes a situation where it's not something that you just discovered now, but a mace that's found there. In other words, it's known. Meaning, even if it was just one mace that's buried there, but if he was buried there knowingly with the intention to establish it as a beis hakvaris, so then even if it's just one, you can't move him from the place. What we're talking about is that he was discovered there and we have no idea who and how he was buried here. So then we say that it's safe to assume that probably it was just temporarily. Then it says mace, person that died was buried there. That means prat lahorog. That excludes somebody that was killed and he was left to be buried there. So in such a case, so most Rishonim learned, the pshat over here is that by a horog, he is allowed to be moved from the spot. But by this horog, you don't have to take along from tfusosai, from the surrounding of the earth, you don't have to take along with him. Horog has a different halacha. And the reason why a horog is different, Rashi says in another place, because when he's murdered, so there's blood that does not get buried together with him, and therefore it doesn't have the same halacha as a regular mace. A regular mace is buried fully intact, his entire body, that's one halacha. But a horog, where he's not buried fully, so therefore it has a different halacha. You don't have to take the earth with him. Again? Horog, no, he was killed, he was murdered. Mushkov, then the Mishnah said that you discovered this mace lying. That means prat l'yoshev. That excludes a mace that you found buried sitting, in a sitting position. Kedarkai, then the Mishnah says in his usual manner, that means prat l'shadoishe munach ben yakaisav, excluding a mace that's buried with his head between his thighs. And the Gemara will explain in a second what this means. Why are these different? So Tani Ula Bar Chanine, so Ula Bar Chanine said, mace shechaser, a mace that is buried and is missing from his limbs or is not fully buried, ein loy tfusa. So over here, there's no halacha of tfusa that you have to, when you remove him, that you have to remove also from the earth surrounding him. That's the pshat I just said regarding horog. But also, v'loy shchunas kvaris. This halacha that we said, if you have three mesim, that it turns into a shchunas kvaris, does not apply if the mesim that are buried there are not buried fully intact. Taisa says on this that it's halacha l'meisha misinai on this second point here, because misvara, if you have three mesim, which is an assumption that there's more mesim buried here, and it was established as a beis hakvaris, why should it be a difference if he's buried full and not? If it's chaser, Taisa says it's a halacha l'meisha misinai. Now, v'chol hani my time lo yamrinon. Why, regarding the other cases we just mentioned before, if he's mushkov, so we said not if he's in a sitting position, and not if his head is between his knees. Why in those cases do we not apply the halacha that this area becomes like a beis hakvaris that you're not allowed to remove it? So the Gemara says, because this is not the way Yidden bury. So when you find a person buried in these unusual positions, so you know that it could be a guy. So therefore you don't have, so this halacha of whether it's a beis hakvaris or not doesn't apply if it's a guy. Another halacha the Gemara says, Matzah shnayim, if you find two people buried side by side, but reisha shalzeh b'tzad margalesav shalzeh, the head of one is near the feet of the other, and v'reisha shalzeh b'tzad margalesav shalzeh, and the head of the other is by the feet of the other. So that's not the way Yidden bury either. So elem tfusa, the halacha of tfusa, to remove also with the earth around doesn't apply. V'lo shchunas kvaris, and also to say that this turns into a cemetery because of this doesn't apply either, because the assumption is that it's not Yidden that are buried here. Matzah shloisha, what if you do discover three people buried in this area? Ha'echad yudua, one person that was buried there, that was known that he was actually buried here. V'shnayim tchila, but two of them you discover and it's unknown where they come from, who buried them here. Or the case was shnayim tchila, or the other gears here in the Gemara is echad tchila. There was one person that you discover here for the very first time, you never knew he was buried there, and shnayim yiduim, and there's another two that it's known that they were buried here. Ein lam tfusa, even though now in total you have three people buried here, but nevertheless ein lam tfusa, the halacha of tfusa, that the earth becomes part of these mesim, that you have to remove it, that doesn't apply. Ve'elam shchunas kvares, and the halacha that this turns into a cemetery because not as three people there does not apply either. So some Rishonim say that this is also a halacha l'Moshe Misinai because not a fact is you have three people buried there. But nevertheless, this is not considered to be a shchunas kvaris. Or other Rishonim say that there is some svara over here to say that because you discover somebody that you didn't know was there b'chlal, so that means that this place only had two people that you knew were buried there, or one person that you knew was buried there. And that's not enough to establish it as a Beis HaKvaris. The other person that you randomly find over here is not enough to combine it to be three to establish it as a Beis HaKvaris. So the Gemara brings a story that happened regarding this. Ma'aseh b'Rabbi Yeshevov. Once Rabbi Yeshevov happened with him, Shabadak, he was doing work, whatever he was doing, and he found Shnayim Yeduim. There were two people that were buried there, and he knew about them. But then he discovered that there was a third person buried there that was not known. He discovered him for the first time. So now there was three altogether. So he wanted to establish this area into a cemetery, that no one should to remove them and it should become a cemetery. Rabbi Kiva said to him, all your effort to turn this into a cemetery, it's in vain that you're working hard here. Because when did they say that this place turns into a cemetery? Either if there were three people that knowingly were buried there to establish it as a Beis HaKvaris, or even if you discover three Mason that were not known before, but you discovered all three Tchila for the first time, then we say that there's an assumption that this turns into that they were buried there to turn into a Beis HaKvaris. But not in this case where two were known and one was not known. So the Mishnah said, when you remove the mason, you have to remove also what's the earth surrounding. How much is this? So first of all, the Gemara actually brings the source for this. Heichidami over here means, what's the source for this halacha that you also have to remove the earth surrounding the mace? Omer Rav Yehuda, Makra, the pasuk says, Yaakov to ask, you should carry me out of Mitzrayim. So the word Mitzrayim is extra. Could have just said, carry me out. So what that means is toil imi, that you take along with me from the earth of Mitzrayim. The kama shir tfusa. How much is the shir of the tfusa that you have to take out together with the mace when you remove him? Pirish Rabbi Lazar. So Rabbi Lazar said, obviously over here you're not good, it's Rabbi Tzadik. Rabbi Lazar here is an Amayra. So he said, so first of all you take from the loose dirt that there is surrounding the mace where he's buried. But then also the chayfer b'psula gimel etzbois. Yeah, then you have to dig deeper into the psula, the virgin of the earth, which means a tough part of the earth that was not moved yet. But you have to dig over there 3 finger breaths and remove that together with the mace, because it's possible that some parts of the mace was absorbed into that part of the earth, so it has to be removed together with the mace. So the Gemara asks on this from a Braisa, Meisvei v'kama shir tfusa. The Braisa addresses this question as well. How much is the shir of the tfusa of the earth surrounding the mace that has to be removed? Pirish Rabbi Lazar b'Rab Tzadik. Rabbi Lazar b'Rab Tzadik, he's a Tana. So he explained, Neiteles a kismin. You have to remove a kismin, which are the splinters of the of wood that could be there, chips of wood, of esaksasais, and also clumps of earth that could be there that absorbed from the mace. Those things that are definitely not part of the mace, that you know that there's nothing absorbed from the mace in it, you can throw it away. But you have to leave aside things that there's a doubt about it, so that you do have to leave aside and you'll have to take it. Now the rest of what you know, things that you know for sure that they have from the mace in it, so it combines together with the mace himself that you remove. And here the Braisa spells out the mace itself, what the mace consists of that you have to remove, whether it's Roiv bin Yonishal mace, it's most of the structure of the body of the mace, or the Roivat Samais, or whether it's the amount of bones that comes up to the amount of Roivat Samais, as we learned before about this in the Masechta, a Roiva of a calf of bones, or Lemeloit Tarved Rekev, or a spoonful of the dirt of the mace. When you remove that, so you remove the other parts together with him. So the point is, though, that what do you see here in this Braisa? It doesn't mention anything about removing, even to dig deeper into 3 finger breaths into the ground to remove that together with the mace. So how does Rabbi Lazar say this? So the one answer is Hudama ki hai Tana. Rabbi Lazar is following the following Tana in this Braisa. The Tanya, we learned in another Braisa, Kama shir tfusa. What's the shir of the earth that has to be moved together with the mace? Rabbi Yechanan mishum ben Azai. So Rabbi Yechanan said in the name of Ben Azai that noitul afat tichuach, you take the soft dirt, And you have to dig deeper into the hard ground. Shalish boys, 3 finger breadths, exactly like Rabbi Lazar said. It said in the Mishnah that if you do discover that there are 3 mason buried there, so now there's an assumption that this would be a Beis HaKvares, so you have to inspect the area 20 amas around. Amar Rave, so Rave says, what happened if Bodak, you're inspecting an area, Opina, and you only found 1 mace. So if there's only 1 mace, you're allowed to remove him, and you removed him. Bodak, you further were doing work in that area, and you find another mace, Opina, and you removed him 1 at a time. And Bodak, again, the person inspects the area of Ashkach. Now you find the 3rd mace. So now it comes out that there were 3 mason buried there, but 2 already were removed. So what happens? Loi hai mefani legabi in hanach. Not this one. Do you have to? Are you allowed to take out to combine to the other 2 that you took out already? The gabi hanach trei, that is, to the other 2 that were already removed from here, because now it's discovered that this really should have the status of a Beis HaKvares, so you're not allowed to remove the last one from there. But v'loy hani trei legabi hai. But you don't have to return the other 2 that you removed from here. You don't have to bring them back to this place once they were removed. To this one that's still there. But another version of what Rava says is, Rava says that in this case where you removed 1 at a time, once he has reshus to be mefana because he took 1 and then he took another one, and now there's only 1 left here, mefana line, so you can clear the whole area, you could remove the last mace as well, and there's no Beis HaKvares here anymore. Fragt the Gemara, but why is that? This should be considered to be an area which is a Beis HaKvares. Now that you see that in total there were 3 mason buried in this area, the assumption is that it's a Beis HaKvares. Who cares if it was removed 1 at a time? Rish Lakish answers, Ila Matzu, they found an excuse, V'tiru Eretz Yisrael. And they wanted to purify this area in Eretz Yisrael. In Eretz Yisrael, B'chlal, they would always be inspecting different areas to make sure to see if the place is pure or if it's not pure. This is one of the things that was different in Eretz Yisrael and Chutz La'aretz. In Chutz La'aretz, there's always a suffix, maybe someone's buried somewhere. That's one of the reasons we learned before in the Masechta. If you go into Eretz Ha'amim, you become Tameh. But in Eretz Yisrael, they would always be inspecting areas to make sure that there's no mason buried there. So over here, once 1 was removed and another was removed, so now they found an excuse and they say that now there's only 1 left. We could clear the area and be matar the area. So the Rosh here explains that the point is, even when you do find 3 mason there, it doesn't mean that we know for a fact it's a Beis HaKvares. There's a certain concern, there's a certain assumption we have. We find 3 that it's possible that there's a Shchunas Beis HaKvares, but it's not for sure as a fact. So therefore, in such a case, even though now we see that there were 3 here, once we remove 2 of them, you can remove the 3rd one. But if it's taka case where we know for a fact it was established as a Beis HaKvares, then there's no excuse. You can't remove a Beis HaKvares once it's established. You inspected 20 amas. So the Mishnah says that you found 3 masons, so you have to then inspect further away to the distance of 20 amas. So you inspected 20 amas, so you didn't find any other mason there. What's the halacha now? So there's 2 pshatim here in this Gemara. According to 1 pshat in the Gemara, what the Gemara is saying is, the Mishnah told us, if you find 3 mason, there's an assumption that this area is a Beis HaKvares. And therefore you have to inspect 20 amas away. So now, what the Gemara is asking is, what if you did that inspection 20 amas away and you don't find any other mason buried there? Maybe there's a svara to say that now that you don't find other mason buried there, so maybe we should go back and say that these 3 that we did find is really also just randomly put there or put there temporarily to be removed. It's not really a Beis HaKvares, because the derech was by a Beis HaKvares, there weren't just 3. There was 3, then a little further away more. So now that you didn't find anyone, maybe you should not be a Beis HaKvares. No, that even though you did not find any other mason buried there, 20 amas around it, nevertheless, 3 itself establishes the area as a Beis HaKvares. That's 1 pshat in the Gemara. Another pshat that Tosfos says here in the Gemara is asking if you inspected the area to one side, 20 amas, but you didn't inspect the area to another side, 20 amas, so do you have to inspect all other sides as well? And the Gemara is answering that you don't have to inspect the other sides. Shchunas Kvares means that the Shchunas Kvares is only on one side and not on the other side. And on that, the Gemara continues and says, my time, now this continuation here of my time does not fit with the first pshat that I said. The Rosh takes it out. But the second shot that it just says, the Gemara now asks, my time, why if you inspect it only to one side, do you not have to inspect to the other side? So on that, Reish Lakish also said, Ilo matzu v'tiru es Eretz Yisrael. That this is again an excuse that they wanted to be mitayir Eretz Yisrael, and therefore you're not obligated to check the other sides. And as long as we see that on one side that there's no other mason buried there, we could assume that this area is not a Beis HaKvaros. Again, this is another Mishnah here that's not related to the subject we spoke about before, but it's based on this idea of whether there was a previous status, and therefore it leads us to a certain conclusion, like the halacha regarding the Beis HaKvaros and the halacha regarding the Tumas HaTahaim. Kol Safik Negayim, if there's a situation where there's a Safik, if the Nega is Tamei or not. How could that be a Safik if a Nega is Tamei or not? So this is a Mishnah Barichas and Masechta Negayim. So the typical example would be if you have two people that had a Nega and they come to the Kayin, and one of the halachas about a Nega is you lock up the person, and then after a week you have to inspect the Nega to see if it grew in size. So what happens if these two people had different Negayim, different sizes, and then after the week they both come out and the Kayan's inspecting to see if it grew in size, but he had a certain amount that he knew that one had a Nega the size of a Gris, or the other had a Nega the size of a Sela, different sizes, but now he doesn't remember who's who. So he doesn't know who's Nega, if it grew or not. So that's a Safek Negayim Batchila. So in other words, it's in the beginning, meaning we did not know until now that he's established as Tamei. And right now it's the first time that there's a suffix whether we should establish him as Tamei or not. So Tahir actually Niskak L'Tumah. So we leave him on his previous status that he's Tahir because he did not yet enter into the status of Tumah. He is not yet Tamei, so we leave him in that status. Now, B'Sheniskak L'Tumah, however, if it's a person that already had a Nega and he's already Tamei, and now he gets a second Nega, and now regarding this second Nega, a similar thing happens, that there's a suffix whether it grew in size or not. So now it's fake Tamei. In such a case, if there's a suffix, because he's already previously established as Tamei, so over here the suffix will be established as Tamei. So from where do I know this halacha that in a case where he was tired until now, and I have a suffix regarding the nega that he has, that I establish him as tired, I follow that previous status. Amar Rav Yudah, Amar Rav, Omakra, the pasuk when it speaks about the kain and the halachas of nega, looking at a nega, so it says there in the pasuk l'tarei l'tamei, that the kain has to look and see whether l'tarei l'tamei to purify him or to say that he's tamei. So hayol pasuk be'akasav b'tara tchila, since the pasuk says first l'tarei, first to purify, so that tells me that in a case where there's a suffix, I have to purify him and not to say that he's tamei. If we're learning it from this word in the pasuk, hiachi afile mishaniskak l'tume nami. If so, this halacha, this pasuk should be applied even in a case where he was already previously established as tamei, and now you have another suffix about another nega. Still, I should say that the suffix is tar, because the pasuk first says l'tare. Or the question is actually even further, that in a case where you have the previous status, that this person was tar until now, I don't even need a pasuk to tell me that I'm going to place him in that status to be tahor. The whole chiddush of the pasuk would be needed in a situation where the person is already tahor, and now I have another suffix regarding another nega. Still, the pasuk says l'tare. So why does this only apply in a case where the person is in a status of tare? I should apply this even in a person that's in a status of tumah. So the Gemara says, you're right. This pasuk is used for something else. Ella ki itmer de Rav Yudah Marav aha itmer. This drasha of this pasuk goes on a different halacha, and as Tosfos here says, regarding the halacha of the Mishnah, you don't need any pasuk. The fact that you follow the chazaka of tare and the chazaka of tumah, that's misvara. You don't need any pasuk. That's what Tosfos says. The Rosh over here brings that in Titus Kayanim, there's another pasuk that's the source for what it says in the Mishnah. There's a big discussion in the Achrayim whether the halacha of the Mishnah is misvara or you dafka need a pasuk for it. But this pasuk we just brought, l'tamai, is going on something else. What is that? This is the halacha regarding a nega, and the halacha is as follows: Im beheres kod lovan. If the actual nega itself, where the person's skin turns white, that's the beheres. So if that color, discoloration, when it became white, was there in the skin before the white hairs, right? One of the simanim of the nega is that it has to be white hairs. So if the discoloration of the skin is before the white hairs appear, so then tumah. That's a sign of tumah. But vim say love and kadmol beheres. But at first the hair becomes white, and then afterwards the skin becomes white. Then tar. Then it's going to be tar. Safik, if you don't know what came first, then Tomei, then he will be Tomei. Rabbi Yeshua says in a situation like this where it's a Safik, Keya. Now what does Keya mean? My Keya. Rav Yehuda, so Rav Yehuda said, Keya v'tohir. Keya means that he's tohir. So some Rishonim taich Keya means that it's like considered to be that it's dim. What? How do they taich it over there?
Fainter light.
The color is fainter than it was before, and it is tohir. And the Gemara asks him this, V'dilme Keya v'tomei. Maybe Keya should be translated that Rabbi Yeshua was saying that Keya, but it is still tomei. Okay, how exactly Keya would mean tomei? It's not clear. Some Rishonim actually say that you should be goydes here Keya, not with a chaf, but with a kuf. And Keya means something else. Keya is Melashon that it gathered, that there's something that happened here in the person's skin, that the blood was removed and whatever, and it caused this discoloration. And it's Tomei, but it really means that it is Tomei. The word Keya is not so clear how to translate this. Anyways, the Gemara asks, how do we know that? How does Rabbi Yeshua say that this is means that it's Tohir? It's on this that Rabbi Yehuda said in the name of Rav. Omakro, the pasuk said L'tarei or L'tamei, that when a kohen inspects the nega to make it Tohir, to make it Tomei, it said first L'tarei. Since the pasuk begins first with the Tara. So we know that in this situation where there's a suffix, if the hairs became white first or the skin became white first, I say that I'm a tired that person, according to Rabbi Yeshua. So another situation where we follow a certain status that it was before. There are 7 different ways that we have to inspect azov. So azov is the tumah when a person has a discharge, and the halacha of a ziva is that there's 3 times a person had a discharge. If it would only happened once, so then that tumah is just for one day. It's not a really a zov. If it happened a second time, so then he becomes a zov for 7 days. If it happened a third time, not only is a zov for 7 days, but he has to bring korbanos as well. So this mission is talking about the second time. The second time a person sees this flow. So the halacha is, it's learned from a pasuk b'psarei, that only if what he saw came without anything before that caused this. He didn't do anything unusual to cause this. If there's something that unusual he did that caused this, that's called an einus. That's an external cause, and he's not going to be tamei. So we have to inspect this person to see what caused this discharge. So there's 7 different ways that we inspect this person. Ad shalim niskak leziva, before he saw the second discharge of the ziva. Now, b'maychel b'mishtet, to see whether he ate or drank something unusual. B'masa, whether he carried something unusual. B'kfitza, whether he jumped, and also unusual. B'chayli, if he was sick. Or b'mare, whether he looked at something, looked at a woman that caused this discharge, or b'hidor, or thought about her that causes discharge. This is all before he saw all these things happened before he saw the second ziva. But now once he saw already twice this ziva, so now aim beit, so we don't have to inspect him if he sees a third time. So over here we're not going to have to inspect him. Oinsai, whether it's something that was an einus, meaning it was caused by something else, or sfeikai, or a situation of a suffix, which the Gemara will explain, or shichva zarai, or the actual the semen itself, tmeim, they're all going to be tamei. Shiraglayim l'davar. Because once he saw already twice, and now he's seeing this discharge a third time, so there's an assumption that this is tamei. So at that point, the third re'iyah, the third time that he sees this ziva, you don't have to inspect the matter to see if it was an einus or not. Similar concept that's based on this, whether we look at a chazaka or not. Hamakes chavere, person that hit his friend. What happened was v'amdu lemisa. Originally, he was estimated that he was hurt to such a degree, he was injured that he would pass away. But v'hakal mima shahoya la'achamikan. But then afterwards, the person he recovered. He was becoming better. And then again, v'hakal mima shahoya. And then la'achamikan hichbid umeis. But then he again went worse, and he did pass away in the end. Chayiv. So the person that hit him will be chayiv for being the murderer, because originally he was estimated that he would die, even though in the middle he was recovering. That is, but it doesn't matter. If eventually he died, so then this person is chayiv. However, Rav Nechemia argues and says, Potter, no, this person will be Potter shiraglayim l'davar. There's legs to this matter. There's reason to think that the fact that he died, there was something else that caused this in between, because the person was recovering already. So something else must have happened that caused him to die, and it's not because of what you did. Sagt the Gemara, Mino Hani Mili. From where do I know this halacha, that when it comes to this person that became already tummy as a zav, by having this discharge once, twice, when it comes to the third time, I don't have to inspect the matter anymore. And over here, I'll be tummy, even if it's an einis. So Amir Abnasan Amakra, because the pasuk says Vahazav es zayvai. So it says twice, zav es zayvai, and then the pasuk there says that he becomes tummy. So once it was twice, lidiyah shlishis. Then there was a third time that he saw the ziva. So in that point I say, iskish l'nekeva. You compare the zachar to a nekeva. In that pasuk it says, v'azav ezayvai, it says l'zachar u l'nekeva. Now this whole halacha that the Mishnah said, that if a person became tamei because of something that happened which was an eines, that's only by a zachar. By a nekeva, any ziva, any flow, it doesn't matter if it was an eines or not. So over here we learn out from this pasuk that when it comes to the third time that the zachar sees this flow, here you compare him to a nekeva, and you don't have to inspect the matter anymore. Fragt the Gemara, but Vatanya, in the Braise we learned that Rabbi Lazar said, B'shlishis bait kenai said that even the third time, by a zachar, when he sees this discharge, you still have to inspect to see if it was a einus or not. And only b'revius ain't bait kenai. Only if it happens a fourth time, you don't have to inspect. The fourth time is not really relevant for the actual status of Ziva, but fourth time means if he's counting his days, a Zav has to count clean days. If during the time when he's counting those clean days, he now sees a fourth discharge, so then you don't have to inspect him. But not three times. For the second and third time, you do have to inspect him. Says the Gemara, yeah, you're right, there's a machlekes here. Ela be'esim komifligi. There's a machlekes whether we darshan the S of the pasuk. Rabbi Eliezer dorish esim. Rabbi Eliezer darshans the S. So when it says in the pasuk v'hazav es zayvei, hazav is 1, S is 2, zayvei is 3. For all those 3 times, he still has to be inspected. But only the fourth time does he become similar to an akeva, and you don't have to inspect the matter. But Rabbanan le darshi esim. Rabbanan don't darshan the S, so you have just zav and zayvei twice, and the third time you don't have to inspect the matter, like it said in our Mishnah.